If you would like to support the podcast and get some extra content while you're there, head on over to patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast and sign up. From the rewatch to the Q&A, we will have loads of content every week. So sign up, patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. And now, here's the podcast. Welcome everybody. It's episode 318 of the Severe MMA podcast, and it's a big one this week as Conor McGregor comes back and tries to avenge his loss to Dustin Poirier and end the trilogy, winning 2-1, and Dustin Poirier will be trying to do the same. So we'll have a big preview of that fight and all the fights on UFC 264 this week. So I know there's a lot of people maybe tuning into this week's podcast who would normally tune in because it's a McGregor week. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We're going to get into all of that. We're going to discuss all of the happenings. We're going to discuss what we think will happen in the fight and much more. But before that, we must tell you that this episode of the podcast is sponsored by the official trimmer of the UFC, Manscaped. They're not only the sponsor of this podcast, but they also have sponsored multiple UFC stars, including Max Holloway, Francis Ngannou, and Sugar Sean O'Malley. Manscaped is here to ensure your favorite fighter doesn't miss weight because of their pubes. So that's always very, very good. Myself and Graeme have been using Manscaped. Everyone listening to this podcast knows for the last maybe year or so, and they've been a great supporter to us and a great supporter to the UFC and to MMA in general. So I think you should all support Manscaped as well. So Manscaped is changing the grooming game with their Perfect Package 3.0, easy for me to say. That Perfect Package 3.0 includes their Premier Lawnmower 3.0 trimmer. The ceramic blade and skin safe technology is designed to reduce nicks or tugs on your fellas down low. For all our international listeners out there, they've just launched their life-changing products in the UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, Canada and the EU. So anyone listening to this can get on it. So it's time to hop on the Manscaped movement. Inside the Perfect Package 3.0, you'll also get the Crop Preserver deodorant for below the belt. It's anti-chafing moisturizing. I actually need some more of that, Manscaped. So if you're listening, last some more out to me there. You'll also find the Crop Reviver toner, which I need more of as well, which is an aloe vera infused cologne for below the belt. For a limited time, subscribers get not one but 2 free gifts. First of all, the Travel Shed bag, which I actually used the other day because I went away to Dublin, and it's the first time since I got it like a year ago I've been able to use it and get away. It's absolutely fantastic. And also you get the patented anti-chafing Manscaped boxers, which I know a couple of lads over on our Patreon have a subscription for them, and you get one every month and stuff. So absolutely fantastic. So to get 20% off and free shipping and all that, all you have to do is insert the code SevereMMA at Manscaped.com. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code SevereMMA at Manscaped.com. That's 20% off, free shipping, code SevereMMA. Right, we might as well start where everyone wants us to start, and that is with Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier coming up this weekend. And do you know what? Normally we come in here and we talk about the fight itself and the breakdown of the fight, and we absolutely will do that in a while. I've actually, if anyone hasn't signed up to our Patreon yet, I actually have gone and rewatched both McGregor versus Poirier 1 and McGregor versus Poirier 2, and that's already up on Patreon. So if you sign up now, you can go and listen to both of those podcasts. I literally watched back the whole fights, talk about them, do a bit of analysis, what can and can't be changed. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I went and we've obviously this podcast, and every week we have the hardcores listening to it that stay up until 7 o'clock in the morning watching fucking Glass and T-Bow fight, Anthony Pettis in PFL and stuff like that. But we also have, McGregor fans maybe, or casual MMA fans who watch maybe 3 or 4 cards a year. And I've asked like a few people like that what they would want to hear coming into the McGregor fight week, and the question I got the answer I got from everyone is probably a question I can't answer, but still I think it's worth talking about, because you'd almost forget it being us being the covering MMA week in, week out. But the big talking point after the last McGregor fight is how he's going to prepare for the next one, how he's going to change things up, if he's going to get like a new camp, if he's going to get new trainers, if he's going to get new training partners and all of that. And I suppose that's the first question we need to look at. For me, I haven't seen anything different. Maybe Graeme, you know more than me, but to me it looks like, he was training with John Mitchell, I suppose, who's a new name, but an SBG guy down in Cork as well. I think Kiefer Crosby and Cian Cowley went over to train with him as well, and I believe John Kavanagh has been over with him as well. So, he's same team. Has he brought in anything under the radar? Has he brought in people to train with? I haven't heard of. Graeme, have you heard anything about that, or is it a similar sort of setup? Now, we don't know what approach they're taking and all that, and we'll get to that in a second, but from the team itself, it seems to be a similar enough team as always.
Well, I haven't been around at all, so I don't really know, but I heard a talk of Kiefer Crosby coming in and things like that, but I don't think there was talk of bringing in outside people. But the camp has been pretty quiet. Like, obviously Conor's been quiet, everybody's been quiet, so we don't really know what's going on, and I obviously haven't been there, so I don't know what's going on either, really. So it's more of I'm in the same position as most people this camp.
Yeah, and I think that's probably like if someone was to talk to Conor McGregor, and like a lot of the time when the McGregor fight comes around, you have, there's a bit of drama, or there's a bit of back and forth, or there's a title, or there's some talk like that. I feel like the biggest story is that story is has he changed up? What is he going to change up? What's different from the first fight compared to now? Now, after that first fight, he did speak a lot about how he hadn't been fighting that much. He'd fought 40 seconds in the last couple of years, basically, and that it not necessarily ring rust, he was saying, but he was kind of saying he needs to get back into groove, needs to get another training camp under him, and maybe that's what he's brought into this, and maybe that's what he's looking to get forward to. But I really think, and we will get into analysis in a second, as I say, I think unless there is a big change in that, as well as, getting more used to being back into MMA, more used to training, obviously with the coronavirus and the UFC basically not wanted him to fight when he kind of did want to fight. And, when you don't have a fight booked, as we've always talked about before, it's harder to get into training camp. And with the coronavirus as well, it was just impossible to train for a while in Ireland where he was. It looks, it could be a bit of that, but also, like, I think after, it was maybe a month or two after the last fight where he came out as well and said, I think there was a picture going around of one of his fight, maybe his UFC debut or something like that, and he was like, I remember preparing for this fight, and I went in and I lived in my sister's spare room near the gym, and I got away from everyone and everything, because everyone had said, the whole silk sheets, it's hard to get up in the morning and stuff. I believe, he's been away over in, is it Abu Dhabi or out in that region of the world anyway, training and stuff. I know his girlfriend had a baby and things like that, so it looks like he has been kind of away in a training camp. It's not exactly, Iceland or, maybe your sister's back room, but maybe it is a bit more of an away training camp and getting away to focus on nothing but that. We haven't seen many whiskey tweets. We haven't seen many, promotions or anything like that. So it feels like there is a bit more there with that and on that side of it. And I suppose, Graeme, you can speak to that more than anything. Like the amount of stuff that someone, we talk about, the silk sheets and it's hard to be getting up and stuff, but the amount of things someone like that famous has to do day in, day out just must be insane. And hopefully,
well, yeah, there's always people trying to pull out of you. You gotta kind of be the kind of distant guy, maybe piss a few people off and not do things that maybe people think you should do, but you gotta kind of be selfish in your training, as he once said many years ago.
Yeah, and hopefully, if you're like a Conor McGregor fan looking in, or an Irish MMA fan, and you want, or even just an MMA fan, and you want the best fight that you can get. That, I suppose, everyone is talking about what has he done in camp, where's he gone, and we don't know that question, but the one hope I think everyone would have was that he has been selfish, he has looked after himself in terms of his preparation, in terms of how hard he's prepared. He's put up a few videos and stuff like that, but we haven't really heard about him, and we'll get to the shy talk and we'll get to the anticipation levels in a second as well. But to me, that is the key to this fight. This fight, okay, it'll be won next Saturday night, but I think it will have to have been won in the preparation. It'll have to have been won in the tactical preparation as well as the physical preparation, because, the last time there was bizarre things coming out about leg kicks, we've never heard of them, and all this stuff, and, some of that was obviously probably a bit glib, but it didn't sound good, it didn't look good, and if he's not fully prepared, if his camp haven't fully prepared him as well, that is going to be a big issue. So, but if they have, I've talked about it before, I talked about it directly after that fight, that there are adjustments to be made, and we will get to them, as I said, but I think that is the key, and that is a very big key coming in. And the question everyone is asking, and I'm sure Conor McGregor will be doing a lot of interviews next week, and I think that's the question that he probably won't answer, even if, let's say if he got fucking, I don't know, MVP to come in and train with him and throw leg kicks at him for 6 months, he probably wouldn't say that, but it's a question I think he needs to be asked. And we always get the question, how was camp and all, but this time I think it's a question that really needs to be asked, but I think it's an interesting one. Anticipation level, so I mentioned it earlier. I feel like, I was a couple of lads I was talking to them the other day, MMA fans, and they were saying, it doesn't feel like there's a McGregor fight coming up not too long away. But I do think in the last couple of days, and we're recording this here now on, Sunday morning here, 11 o'clock, I do feel like it's pumped up a little bit, and a little bit more even than recent fights. I think in the last couple of days, a couple of videos have come out, and that tweet, I think he did an interview, Dustin Poirier did an interview with Brett Okamoto. I haven't listened to it yet, but he said he put Conor McGregor on aeroplane mode the last time they fought, and then McGregor put up like a thing on Facebook, I think it was, kind of John back at him a little bit. So I think just small things like that, they kind of started off and they get it going, and I feel like people are starting to talk about it and starting to think about it as we come like within 6 or 7 days for it here. But I do think fights over the last while, with how many MMA cards there are at the moment and how many big UFC cards there are, have been flying more under the radar until like late in the week, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, after the media day, after the weigh-ins, and even like for a lot of people just on the morning of the fight, maybe with ESPN, hearing it on ESPN over there, like us and with Sky Sports News, and just picking it up and watching it that night. But what would you say about the anticipation levels? Where are you seeing much stuff about it, or do you think people are getting excited about it now?
Yeah, well, like I was with a friend yesterday, and he's an MMA fan, but he kind of dips in and out. He wouldn't be watching every card, but he'd be a bit more than a casual, and maybe recently he hasn't really been talking to me about many fights. He'd be like messaging me, asking me what I think about who's going to win this or these odds on certain fights and stuff. And I think maybe that kind of fan who dips in and out is definitely going to be interested in this one. But maybe, as you said, they'll be sucked in once the videos of the kind of back and forths or the press conferences or the media interviews start going out. Like those videos will be on like all social media and YouTube and all that stuff. And I think that's what really gets people interested. It is a bit of a more late burner than before. Like obviously back when Conor was on the way up in Ireland, people were talking about it constantly, even when he didn't have a fight lined up or asking when his next fight would be. And it's definitely not that level anymore. But as fight week comes, I expect more people to be ringing or messaging or asking what do I think, or I think the first one, I think the Habib one I talked about, the Habib fight, people were talking in the lead up, there's no hype, what's going on, and then once fight week came, it really exploded and everybody was talking about it, and obviously did 1.6 million pay-per-views and stuff. So I think we'll be able to get a much better sense of the anticipation levels and the hype levels once Thursday comes around.
Yeah, and it's that's a very good point, because it was a question I have actually prepared for someone who will be on the podcast with me tomorrow. So about how that has kind of changed and how McGregor's changed. I remember when Conor McGregor went into Tough. At that time, I don't know, like whenever it was just after Chad Mendes fight, wasn't it? I remember everyone was saying we're seeing too much of Conor McGregor. He's all over the place. He's everywhere. Every time you turn anything on in MMA, every time anyone does an interview, they're talking about Conor McGregor. He tweets back at him, and it was fun and funnier back then, I suppose. But over the last while, I think he has done that a bit. I don't think it has hit as well. But then I think there has been a lot of silence from him. We haven't, he's putting stuff up on Instagram, but nothing of note or anything like that. Just the odd time he would. But I feel like we have the exact opposite of what we had back then. We had too much McGregor at one stage, or maybe, and I think Tough actually helped, because he was away in that house for a while and he couldn't say much about it. So that kind of actually helped a little bit, I think. And then he came back in force when Tough started again. I think we got a little bit of a break from it, the whole MMA community, and it was good. But now what everyone I think loved about Conor McGregor or even hated maybe was how we would always hear from him. He would never stop talking, and he was just talking shite all the time. And I suppose maybe he needed to do that on the way up, and now maybe it's not it's not the way he wants to go from it with it. But I do feel like in this game, I think that's a big thing and a big part of it, and to be that kind of constant character. I know there's our basketball fans over here, but Kevin Durant, I think, is one of those guys now who's like tweeting all the time and talking shit, and I think people kind of like him because of that. And I think that's easier to do in MMA than any other sport. Although, look, McGregor probably gets criticised more for it as well whenever he chirps in with something, but I feel like that's a little bit of a missing part for him. And I think coming into this fight week as well, we talked about there will be a media day. I believe there's a press conference lined up and everything. It'll be interesting to see, do we get like nice guy Conor like we had the last time? Do we get like full on, P-head, you're a hick from Louisiana type of thing? Or do we get maybe a combination of both? What would you like to see first?
It seems to me that Poirier is trying to nearly draw the aggressive trash talking McGregor out. I don't know why he'd want that, or if it's a non-conscious thing he's doing, but it seems to me like he seems to be the one trying to engage in a bit of back and forth.
Do you reckon he thinks maybe it's an easy fight and he just wants to make more money out of it by building the hype?
I don't think so. I think he knows this is a massive, huge legacy fight, and you know what I mean. This is huge for him. It's huge for Conor too. There's a lot on the line here. There's a lot of jeopardy here. If Conor's to win this, he's probably into a title shot, and if he's to lose this, people will be considering, is he ever going to be what he was before? And they're probably going to be thinking no. So this is a huge jeopardy fight for both guys. So I don't think either guy is taking this as an easy fight.
Yeah, this is, I think for McGregor especially, I think Poirier has built his way up before and done it the way a normal MMA fighter would do it. But Conor McGregor's not a normal MMA fighter. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. This is a graph fight for Conor McGregor. We always talk about them in MMA. Are you on the way up or on the way down? And not necessarily in terms of making money or in terms of big fights, but in terms of the title challenge. I think if McGregor loses this fight, it's not that I think he'd be completely out of the realms of talking about a title challenger. Let's say if he was to fight Nate Diaz next or a Masvidal, I think, and win one of those, he'd be right back in it.
Their roots back, you could imagine him going in there and beating a Diaz or beating a Chandler or beating a Oliveira. These are matchups that are possible to win, but it's just momentum's a thing, and obviously the title is right. The title shot is right there if he can beat Poirier, and the same for Poirier if he can beat Conor. The title shot is right there. So there's a lot on the line here. The crowd's going to be back as well. I think, it was kind of strange and odd watching Conor walk out and not have no crowd to feed off. Even back in the Cage Warriors days, what was it, 800, 900 people there? There was still always a vocal support for Conor at all of those. And, that'll most likely, be back now. So maybe that will affect things as well and how comfortable he feels in there. There's a lot of different factors going on here, a lot of different things that it's hard to know what's going to happen. There's, as you mentioned, the camp and the technique and trying to counter and what's Poirier going to do and all the jeopardy and the fans being back and which Conor's is he going to come polite? Is he going to come? There's a lot of questions around this.
100%, and I think it's a very, very interesting one. The crowd, there was a small crowd for his last fight, but it wasn't anything near what it's going to be like next week. No, Irish fans, I don't think are going to be able to travel over for it. So that kind of question, we always talk about.
What about Irish Americans though?
Yeah, absolutely. But we always get the question about, let's say if we're doing American radio or something next week, and someone's going to talk about the Irish love and the Irish graft from McGregor, if it's still there, it's hard to know really at this stage. I remember there was a stage there where everyone. Not everyone, but a lot of people, the young people of Ireland, kind of loved Conor McGregor and they loved what he was about and that he wasn't happy with second place and everything like that, and he was doing it in a kind of a boisterous, cocky way, and people like that. And then there was a time where he started getting, saying different things and doing different things and being accused of different things, and people started to not like him. And I feel like now, over the last while, there hasn't just been as much opinion on him, and I'd be interested to see if if that is the case this weekend as well, because we don't know. Like, before we could take general guesses, and we've actually, me especially, one stage I got awful abuse because of something I said, and it turned out to be a little bit right, I think. But anyway, but we'll see this week what it's like, what people are talking about. We will look. I guarantee you we'll have the coverage in the Independent or in the Examiner or wherever it might be, saying MMA is not a sport and this,
the hot take to get comments and shares, and people will fall right into the trap and share it and be like, this is disgusting.
Yeah, please don't share. If you're listening to this, right, you're going to see one of them during the week. You might see 2 or 3 of them even. Don't share them. Don't say this is the kind of coverage we're getting.
Don't comment.
No, we've been talking for the last 20 minutes about this fight, and we're going to get into the actual fight itself in a second here. This is the sort of coverage you need. Or go over and listen to fucking, the Co-Main Event podcast, or listen to Crooklyn, or so, people covering the sport who are trying to actually cover it, and support them rather than talking about shit like this, or sign up for our Patreon rather than buying the fucking paper this week. So I just don't give it any credence. If you're an MMA fan and you don't like it, it's not for you, move on from it. That would be my advice on that. But
it's there to try and roll you up. Like, yeah, it's a sad state of journalism, but it's the state we're in.
Yeah, 100%. It really is. I just want to roll back quickly to one point before I move on and we talk about maybe the tactics of the fight itself and stuff. I made a point there, like, this fight being the kind of the graph fight McGregor, if he goes up or down, and it's not necessarily in his whole career or his moneymaker or anything like that, but I think every fight McGregor usually takes, it is to get to a title or to get to a huge fight. Now you could say, what about the 2 Nate Diaz fights? It was, the first one was short notice, and the second one was because he lost the first one, basically. Like, after that, he went straight into a UFC title fight against Eddie Alvarez. Yeah,
the plan was always to try and get the 2 titles. He talked about that for a long time. That was just a detour because obviously he ended up losing on short notice.
Yeah, and then obviously, he got the Khabib fight, and then Cerrone was kind of a comeback fight to get back into the title reckoning. He could have taken bigger fights at that point, with the Nate Diaz or wherever it might have been. But and this fight as well, the Poirier, the last Poirier fight, obviously to get back towards the title reckoning as well. Poirier was the number 1 contender, number 2 contender at the time, had just fought for the belt not long before it, and now everyone thinks Poirier should have been the first man on the team sheet, we'll say, for the vacant title fight, which just happened, but he chose the McGregor fight instead, obviously. So, like, McGregor arguably is fighting the best active lightweight in the world right now, so he's right there at the top. But I think if he loses this fight, it will be Nate Diaz, it'll be Masvidal, it'll be a big money fight like that. Raw, Nate coming off of a loss, Masvidal coming off of a loss. I think it'll be one of those fights. It'll be one of the fights that I think we've kind of referred to them as back pocket fights before. The ones that you have there if all else fails, and you can make a lot of money out of them. And that is not the direction I think Conor McGregor wants to go. We talked about him with money, and that being his number 1 for years and years and years. But I feel like it is, obviously he loves making money, and don't get me wrong, but he has always built fights to make money to get towards the top as well, apart from maybe the Floyd Mayweather fight, although that was kind of at the top, you could argue it's but it's a big turning point here for McGregor in his career. If he wins it, he will be fighting for a title, I would argue, or I would almost guarantee. And if he loses it, it will be, I think, a back pocket fight. So it'll be interesting to see what happens after that. And I think that is what, from a sporting point of view, you could argue this is Conor McGregor's biggest fight since Jose Aldo, I think. You could, from the sporting point of view, because, like, with the Aldo fight and the Mendes fight as well, I think he was kind of still proving a lot to people. And it's not just because it's Conor McGregor and there's talk about him. I think every fighter has that, even like Chris Weidman. I remember before the Anderson Silva fight, I was like, he has no hope, there's no way. And he goes out and beats him. Well, okay, I'm proven wrong. And I think Conor McGregor did that to a lot of people in that fight, in the Aldo fight. I think if you didn't believe in him after that, you were kind of an idiot or just hated him or whatever. And he had all the fights since as well. But I think from a sporting point of view, this is the one to prove he is still at or towards the top of the game in MMA. That last fight, okay, he won the first round, absolutely, don't get me wrong, and when it's with McGregor, there's always either too much or too little said in terms of praise or the opposite of praise. And I think coming into this one, you have to look at it with that, though. You have to look at it like this is the turning point fight. If he wins, he's right up there as the best, and if he loses, we can make the claim, and lots of people will say it, that he no longer is the best. You'll see people saying he never was great either, and those people, like the Ronda Rousey people who say it as well, to a lesser extent, are just completely wrong and have kind of are trying to get off their fucking narrative, I suppose. But from a now sporting point of view, I think it's huge. So let's get into the analysis of this fight, and let's talk about it, and then we'll talk about the other fights in 264, and there's a couple of bits of news as well that we will just touch on, or one bit even, from Irish MMA. But looking at the last fight and having gone back and watched the fight, and I'll speak to people about this during the week as well that maybe know more than you and me, Graeme, but I feel like watching back those fights, the big difference between McGregor in fight 1 and fight 2, and the reason he lost fight 2 and won fight 1, was because of the better movement, was because of the way he could get in and out, not get caught with leg kicks, not get caught with shots, and land his shots more quickly than his opponent, Dustin Poirier, could land on him. Now, the question there then, I suppose, is, will he go back to that, number one? 2, does he want to go back to that? Is his new style like a style that he thinks is a level up on his old style, or just a changed style? That's what I would be very interested in. And in overall, like Conor McGregor, we've seen in the documentary, he's had, bad knee injuries. He's had very, very bad injuries over the last while. Has, said 2 years ago, or whenever it was, the Eddie Alvarez fight, was that because he wanted to fight Eddie Alvarez that way, or was it because he couldn't move as well anymore with those injuries? That's a kind of another thing I think might be, and we've talked about that before in previous years as well. But what do you think in terms of the style? Do you think he will revert to type? He will go back to the early days, Conor McGregor loose on his feet? Or do you think we'll get this boxing? He did a bit of the in and out and stuff as well coming in, but there's a lot of like in the pocket boxing, moving his shoulders, trying to land that front hand uppercut and things like that. What do you think we'll see from Conor McGregor on Saturday?
Well, I think the post-fight press conference, was it, or was it an interview afterwards? He was talking about needing the kind of bouncing and in and out movement. So I suppose that's the best information we have. Obviously, we talked about him not really doing media, not really talking much since publicly. So the kind of last thing we heard from him about the kind of technique side of it was that he thought he needed more of that. So you'd assume that that's what he's doing, but it's all assumptions, He didn't seem, what you were saying about, is this a new, better style, that he didn't seem in the post-fight press conference to be thinking that way. But it's right after a loss, it's sore, it's you're trying to sort out the thoughts in your head. Maybe time has changed what he thought, but I don't know. These are all questions we need to see answered.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting one, because I hadn't thought of that, like that he is open to adjusting backwards, which I think, I don't know, for me, if I'd never heard Conor McGregor speak and only watched him fight, I would think it's the opposite way. I would think this is a function of what he has learned by going over to boxing and what he's brought back and seen to work in MMA. If anyone watched PFL and saw Clay Collard, the way he's fought in MMA since he's came back, okay, the Pettis fight was unbelievable, especially for the first couple of rounds, and his next fight wasn't as good, but you can see that he's brought back some boxing back with him and used it like really, really well in his fights. Whereas McGregor has done a bit of that too, absolutely, but I feel like the Poirier one, it was just, you can't get away with that stuff at that sort of level when you're fighting someone that good. We talk about for years why MMA fighters against boxers, we're always like, what's going to happen? Well, they won't even need to take him down, they'll just kind of kick the leg off him. And that's kind of what happened here. It was kind of like an MMA fighter against a boxer, and Conor McGregor is absolutely an MMA fighter. A lot of people wouldn't like to say it and would talk about his ground game being trash and everything like that, but it's really not. And he's really, he's always been a very well-rounded MMA fighter for years and years and years. And I think himself, looking back at that, if he was to look at it with an open mind, he would probably be, remember that whole stuck in the mud thing he was talking about before? I think he'd be calling himself a kind of a stuck in the mud fighter watching that. Now, he landed some good stuff, and his hands look crisp at time as well, and he rocked Poirier a couple of times, but I don't think it was what Conor McGregor would expect from himself fighting in, a UFC #1 contender fight for the lightweight title. That is the apex of the sport. Well, I suppose the title is the apex of the sport, but it's very close to the apex of the sport, especially when we had a vacant title and the guy who everyone thought should have been fighting for the title is now fighting Conor McGregor instead. So you could argue it is, but I'm very interested to see. Someone actually texted me this morning. Who was it? But I think Poirier said in an interview that he will be looking to check leg kicks instead of throwing them. So that's an interesting one. I think Poirier expects McGregor to come out and throw leg kicks. And I talked about it the last time coming into the fight with Dan Hardy about southpaw versus southpaw, and it'd be as open for McGregor as it would be for Poirier. Do you think that's the thing? Like, he did it against Diaz at the second time, didn't he?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Poirier's probably looking at the Diaz fight and saying, oh, well, when the rematch he did have, he was heavy on leg kicks. For Conor anyway, he threw a lot more than he usually would, and obviously the calf kicks were a big thing in the first fight. But I think also Poirier obviously went for a takedown and kind of got it. Didn't really do anything with it, but he, making a person think about the takedown is definitely an important thing as well. And taking a bit of sharpness and pop off those punches just by tiring slightly a guy with a bit of grappling is always beneficial as well. So I can see Poirier maybe trying to do that again, trying to sneak in takedowns whenever he can, or at least try to tire out Conor in grappling positions.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if he didn't try to do that. Like, I think whether he beats McGregor early or tries to beat him late or tries to drag it into the final rounds, from Poirier's point of view, obviously, I think he will be trying to do that. He will be trying to take him down. If he can submit him or if he can ground and pound finish him, absolutely. But just the wearing him out, taking away that power is a big thing against someone like a McGregor, or any puncher like an Ngannou or anyone like that. You need to take away that pop early. And I think from Poirier's point of view as well, I think, every time, like all the lads I named there, and McGregor as well especially, I think once you weather that early storm, it's the biggest part of it. McGregor will know that as well. And I'm sure he'll be prepared and be very, very, cardiovascularly prepared, I suppose, if that's the phrase. But we've seen McGregor before. It's very hard to put the one round fucking killer knockout artist with a 5-round fighter. It's very hard to put those two things together. If you go out and you fucking lay it all on the line for 5 minutes, it's very hard to do it for another 20 minutes after that. So finding a happy medium is a big thing. And if you're someone, if you prepare and you think you're going to knock someone out in the first round, and if you do, all well and good, but if you don't, what's going to happen after that? So I think, as I said, that happy medium will have to be found there for McGregor. We've seen Poirier before. I think Poirier is, funnily enough, kind of similar to McGregor, like that. He does get tired, but then he finds a second wind, and I think McGregor has done that in the past before. The problem with McGregor is, everyone says he's bad cardio and everything like that, but there isn't that much to see from Conor McGregor. We had the 5-round fight against Nathan Diaz, which he won. We had the 3-round fight where he went to decision against Max Holloway and won. We had the Floyd Mayweather bout, which he went like 9 rounds with the greatest boxer of all time. He got tired. That's where I take, and the Diaz fight as well, that's where I make that assumption from, and it's based on 2 fights. He got tired, he got a second wind, and then he kind of finished stronger after that. Like the 4th round against Diaz, I think, was like one of the biggest rounds of Conor McGregor's career up until this point. So I think he kind of has that second wind. I think Poirier is similar as well. I think it was the Eddie Alvarez fight, was it? The Gaethje fight, even where he came out fighting very, very well, then kind of got a little bit tired, landed a few shots on, and then kind of took away himself and got even better towards the end of the fight. So I think they're similar enough on that. Look, I think from a technical point of view, if McGregor comes out and goes hard for it early, I think that's the best thing he can do, to be honest. I don't think he should fight similarly technically than what he did in the first fight. I think he should change it up a little bit. Maybe he cannot do the in and out movement, or doesn't want to do the in and out movement as much as he used to do before, lighting his feet, throwing those hook kicks and wheel kicks and stuff like that. Maybe he wants to box a little bit more, but I think go for it. Like, that's what Conor McGregor is. I think if he's going to win this fight, okay, could he win it 5 rounds like he did the Diaz fight? Yeah, absolutely. We've been bitten with that before. I said probably before that fight, probably go back and listen to the podcast, I probably said absolutely not, no hope, and then he goes out and does it. I think Poirier is tougher. I think it'd be very, very hard to do that against Poirier, and much harder than Diaz. But I think this fight, I think Conor McGregor needs to fight in a similar tactical way to the first fight. Change the technique, move a bit more, maybe more kicks, but try to land that knockout shot early. That's what Conor McGregor is. We know he's a hitter, and maybe not, a 1 round knockout, but 1 and 2 round. Land those big shots. Take pieces out of Poirier and mind yourself as well while doing it. I think that's a big part of it. But if he does adjust the movement, pulls that leg out and doesn't leave himself in that pocket to be kicked or to be hit by Poirier, and that I think it's not just the leg kicks as well. We're kind of talking a lot about that. We haven't gone back and watched the fight. I think McGregor's biggest problem in that fight was when he did land and he was getting countered by Poirier after his own shots. Poirier was either hitting him or getting very close to hitting him many, many times because McGregor wasn't getting out straight away. Now, McGregor has good head movement there and he dips down and he's intelligent, but there's only so much you can do with the amount of weapons you have in MMA. Poirier's going to catch him with a punch or an elbow or a knee or something in there. And that's when you're like moving in the pocket and trying to avoid everything in the pocket in MMA, it's nigh on impossible. So if McGregor can maybe improve in that direction, but also improve in just getting out, you need to either get away or get out. And I think McGregor needs to do a little bit better in that as well. If he can keep himself safe for the first couple of rounds, I think McGregor can win this fight, but I think that's going to be very, very tough. And I personally think that those adjustments back to where he was are the key to this fight, and I'm very skeptical about whether he can do it. I'm very, very skeptical. People probably want our picks for this fight, and we will give them in a second, but is there anything there you'd like to pick out and or think that could be a key for this fight, especially in the stand-up realm? We can talk about maybe the ground game in a second, but from the stand-up, do you think McGregor, we've always talked before, McGregor's taken shots in his whole career, but I felt like he took more shots, even punches, against Poirier than he's ever taken. Was that something you noticed as well?
Yeah. Do you think there was a bit of, because he beat him before kind of easily, there was a bit of underestimating going on there?
I think so, yeah.
I think so too. I think this time, he'll definitely be, not underestimating. I don't think either guy will be underestimating, but I think, he didn't really respect the leg kicks at all. I think he thought he could just take them, march through them, and I definitely think that'll be obviously different in his mind. It's definitely like another obstacle to overcome when you've been finished by the guy in the last fight. It's a different mental space, but he's shown before that he bounces back very well historically from losses and seems to be able to adapt and learn. So if he can do some of the things we're talking about, if he can kind of bring it back to the old style a little bit and maybe not completely, throwing all these a lot of high energy kicks might not be the best move, but mixing in head kicks and how good his left head kick is, it kind of has very little tail. And I think I don't know if it was an Instagram Q&A or something he did something anyway, and he was talking about head kicks and stuff. So I think he's definitely taught more about the technique and tactics side of this fight than he did the first one. And he's shown in the past to have a very, very good fight IQ and all that. So it's very interesting to see, to see how he comes out in the first 30 seconds, what stance he has, and everything about this fight is very interesting to me to see what the crack is.
Yeah, it's really is. I think your point about fight IQ as well as there is a very interesting one that I hadn't really thought of. But I always talk about McGregor before, and I think it's the most underappreciated part of his game is his intelligence. He's an unbelievable athlete and has unbelievable power and stuff, but his intelligence to land those shots has always been, his best asset. You could argue, and he didn't look like an intelligent fighter in the last fight. So can he do it again and be more intelligent in this fight? Absolutely, I think he can. But that is a big key. And for Poirier, I think Poirier has to be intelligent in this as well, because it's very hard, I think, for Poirier to prepare for this fight, because we were talking about it here, and we've talked for the last fucking 40 minutes nearly about it here, about what is Conor McGregor going to do? How is he going to prepare? How is he going to be different? Usually with fighters, we kind of know what they're like a little bit, you know? And for, like, Poirier will probably be coming out again, like, I'm gonna wait and kind of hold back and see maybe what McGregor's gonna do, but that's dangerous against someone who hits so hard so early like Conor McGregor. So, like, from his tactical point of view, if you're looking at it from a Poirier point of view, I think you have to be more careful early again. I think a lot of clinching, a couple of takedowns early, get that head out the way, jab off the cage, because McGregor's very good at cutting off the cage, and I think if he does continue to cut off the cage and can be better defensively, I think it's going to be a very hard night for Poirier as well. So Poirier needs to jab, move sideways off the cage and get away from McGregor, and make McGregor run after him, I think, in the first round or two, if you can't be in the clinch or on the ground with him. So, and on the ground, we talked about the wrestling as well before. You mentioned in the first fight, Poirier took him down, but McGregor immediately, he got his arse to the cage, got his back to the cage and got up. And in the clinch, I would argue it was 50-50. McGregor probably landed the better shots in the clinch, but from like a technical point of view, I think there was a bit of control from McGregor, a bit of control from Poirier, and not really much in it. We've seen Poirier's submissions before. We've only seen one submission from Conor McGregor in his career, but Poirier has obviously very, very good submissions on the ground. So I think McGregor, when he is he is early in the fight, when it's when he's dry and when he's not tired, I think he'll be able to defend Poirier pretty well in the wrestling and jiu-jitsu round. Maybe he'd get taken down, but I think he'd be able to survive and maybe get his arse to the cage again and get back up. But I think the later it goes, even in towards the second and third round, I think that's maybe where the difficulties can lie. What do you think about just the ground game in general? I know you've seen a lot of Conor McGregor on the ground and doing the documentary and stuff, more than probably anyone who's listened to this podcast or who has watched Conor McGregor fight. He's better than we think there, isn't he?
Yeah, I think that narrative was there because we hadn't really seen him on the ground when he was a young pro, and when we had he'd had a couple of submission loss to Satenkov and Duffy, obviously. But we've seen, in the before he got tired in the first fight with Diaz, we saw him sweep Diaz. Like, we've seen him, escape against Mendes. We've seen him, he's obviously not the best wrestler and grappler in the division, but he's definitely that old narrative that seems to have carried on is nonsense. Like, he's obviously a very, very well-rounded fighter. Obviously his first base is obviously striking, and that's obviously his best way, but it's not as if he's a one-dimensional fighter like fighters of old, the way people kind of some people seem to think. Yeah, it's
true. Right, the pick, Graeme. What's your pick? Who do you think will win? How do you think they'll win it?
Like, it's a tough one. I think you're right that Conor has to go for it early and will go for it early. That's been proved a very fruitful tactic throughout his career, bar a couple of times. Obviously Diaz and that Poirier second fight was obviously it didn't go well, but in that fight he did land some big shots, as you said. I think he has to go for it early and look for the KO and rattle Dustin, not let Dustin get into his game. I think if he lets Dustin get into his game and get his game plan going and maybe like working the clinches and try to work leg kicks again, I think it's obviously going to play in Poirier's favor. But I actually have a feeling that Conor's going to do it in the first round. I think he's gonna go for it early, and I think he might be able to get it done. He's a big puncher, and he's obviously he studies tape a lot, and those counters that Poirier was getting before, I don't think are going to be there this time, especially not as often. Conor's gonna I'd imagine Conor's gonna be in and out a lot quicker. Even if it isn't in a bouncing stance, he's not going to be there trying to move his head. He's going to be out of range. And I think the fact that he's obviously going to have to be taking this fight very seriously, and I think under pressure and rising to the occasion, he's shown he can do that before. And I think the crowd behind him and the energy of that will help him as well. And if he is to crack Poirier early, like the noise might rattle Poirier even more, or encourage Conor to attack even more, and that has its ups and downs as well. But I can see like loads of reasons to pick Poirier, but I have a feeling Conor might get it done early here.
Yeah, Yeah, look, I wouldn't be surprised. I think, look, McGregor throughout his whole career has been a very smart fighter, and a very kind of, I think maybe self-taught is not the word, but kind of a self-analyzing, fucking, it makes a lot of his own decisions about how he fights and the best way to do it, and you can see like the understand. Even if he doesn't, you can see he has the understanding for what he's going to do, and how he's going to do it. And if he comes into a rematch with the first fight behind him and wins it with better tactics, I wouldn't be at all surprised. I think though, like the big talk we had after the last fight, and we started off the podcast talking about this, is the adjustments, the changes, what he did different, what he did new, and maybe he has done all those things. I haven't seen it, so for me to have not seen any of that and have seen the first fight, I can't pick Conor McGregor. I don't think coming into this fight, like, but just that Conor McGregor against Dustin Poirier this time, he just looks so flat, looked so stuck in the mud. I'm not sure he can adjust back to his old style. If he can, if McGregor comes out and he fights in his old style and he looks fit and he's moving everywhere, I think he probably will win, to be honest, because I think that style is, and I said it right after the last fight, and go back and listen to the podcast, that style is built to beat what Poirier did in that fight, and I think he can win that way. But I'm not sure he's going to do that. I think there needed to have been more done than there was done, from what I've seen. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, and I'm just completely assuming. So if I am wrong, I'm wrong. But I think McGregor will come out quicker, and he will try to knock him out early, and he'll try to do bigger things. But I think Poirier will be more careful early. He will do a lot more clinches, we talked about earlier, and I think because of that, I think the fight will go a little bit longer. So I think it'll go 3 to 4 rounds, and I think McGregor will get a little bit tired. Poirier will start to land a few shots. I think when McGregor takes a few shots, he's the sort of lad where the opponent will get like he G'd up, and McGregor will start taking more and more. I think my prediction is Dustin Poirier late, maybe third round submission. That's what I think. I think McGregor might even go for a takedown and end up getting fucking Peruvian necktied or something like that, or a Darce or an Anaconda or something like that from Poirier. So, but it's an interesting fight, and that's just me completely speculating, obviously, as it is with you too, Graeme. I think, look, two of the best lightweights in the world, a huge trilogy, 1-1. It's a brilliant fight, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it tactically plays out. Like, you could talk about McGregor all you want, and you could talk about Poirier all you want, but fighter A with this skill set versus fighter B with that skill set, just matching up after they've done it twice before is always very, very intriguing, and I'm really looking forward to the fight itself. And best luck to both lads. I'm sure they're both lovely lads. They're both lovely lads. I've gone and I was going to say many's the drinking session, but one drinking session with Dustin Poirier, never Conor McGregor. I'm sure you've got one to do with him, but those stories are probably better off for another day. But however, let's talk about a little bit about the rest of the cards. On the undercard, the UFC Fight Pass section, Jennifer Maia versus Jessica at flyweight, not a bad fight there at all. Omari Akhmedov versus Brad Tavares down the card. Jerome Rivera on the card as well, and a couple more lads. Dricus du Plessis against Trevin Giles at middleweight. I like du Plessis. I think he's a good fighter. Ryan Hall versus Leah Topuria. What a fight that is. Topuria looked absolutely fantastic recently, and Ryan Hall, we know his leg lock 50-50 game, so that'll probably be a weird fight if you're a fan of if you're a kind of a casual fan of MMA and you don't know either of these two lads. Ryan Hall is basically a guy who falls to his back and tries to like break your leg in every fight, and can either do that,
rolls under you with jumps and some kind of mad unseen way.
He's either going to break your leg with a submission or just roll around and just do nothing for 15 minutes.
And on the feet, he's going to spam head kicks like it's a UFC video game.
UFC game, yeah. So that'll probably be the oddest fight of the weekend you watch, but looking forward to that one. Although Mikel Pereira's in the fight above that as well against Nico Price. What a fucking fight that is. Pereira. How the fuck you say? Pereira. That's how you say it. He's like lost my ability to speak there. I was trying to say Prosecco the other day, and I was like Prosecco, Progresso, or something. I was like, I'm terrible. That fight, I just hope Pereira fights like Pereira fights. I really hope he does. These last couple of fights, he has tried to be more normal. He's tried to be a more normal fighter. I think against Nico Price, that'll actually work against him. I think he'd be better off going out and just going fucking mad again. But two of the biggest welterweights, you'll find that's going to be an absolute fucking... There's someone going to get knocked out in that fight. That's going to be a great fight. And then we have Carlos Condit, one of the most exciting fighters in the history of MMA, coming back against Max Griffin here. So that should be fun as well. So a very, very good undercard. On the main card, we have Sean O'Malley against Chris Matinho, who's taking the fight.
Is this an Irish Sean Sheehan Twitter handle night?
Yeah, well, it always is when Sugar Sean O'Malley is fighting. I'll be in there. That I don't know much about Chris Matinho, I won't lie. I think he's come in from, was it LFA or somewhere like that? Lewis Smoke was supposed to fight Sean O'Malley, which to me was a bit of an odd fight. Although it would have been a fun fight, I would have liked to have seen it. But yeah, be a big opportunity for Chris Matinho, and I think the UFC are trying to build Sean O'Malley, and they're actually doing a pretty good job of it, to be honest. But putting him on a Conor McGregor undercard would probably, he'd probably bring out the Irish flag and everything like that. I'm sure the Irish Americans will absolutely eat that up, so it's a wise placement to put Sean O'Malley on that, opening up the card if he gets a big knockout or something. I think that could be very, very smart by the UFC, so that's definitely a good move for them. Arguably then the women's bantamweight number one contender fight again from Irina Aldana against Yana Kunitskaya. Maybe I'm forgetting someone there, but I think that's especially if Aldana wins. I like Aldana. I've been a big fan of her for ages. I think that's the question. If you could pick out one person, okay, she lost to Holly Holm last time out, but she has beaten Ketlin Vieira, who was the number one contender before that. And if there's one person you can kind of pick out of people on the way up to challenge Amanda Nunes, I think she'd be the one I'd like to see now. I don't think she'd beat Amanda Nunes or anything like that. But apart from Kayla Harrison, obviously, but we leave that chat to last week. But I think that's a good fight, and I think Kunitskaya is tough, tough as hell. But I think Aldana will do that one. Big heavyweights then. Former NFL player / terrible human being Greg Hardy against lovely lad Tai Tuivasa, who drinks beer out of shoes. I think a lot of people will want Tai Tuivasa to probably win this fight, to be honest. But do you know Tai Tuivasa has more UFC heavyweight fights than Daniel Cormier and Brock Lesnar? Do you know that? No, there you go. But yeah, looking forward to seeing that one. And then in the co-main event, this is a big one as well. Arguably a welterweight number one contender bout, although with the fucking way they're matchmaking welterweight recently, it probably isn't. Gilbert Burns against the most beautiful man, the most magnificent creation that God has ever put on this green earth, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I feel like this should be one of those fights over 5 rounds, that they're just the arbitrary 5-round fight that the UFC have been doing lately. Pity it isn't, but what do you think before I get into my thoughts on Burns versus Wonderboy? It's a fun fight, isn't it? Who do you think will win it?
Yeah, it's a fun fight. I always love watching Wonderboy. Like, he brings something different. Like Ryan Hall, we were talking about it, does the same. So there's definitely some interesting fights on this card, and Wonderboy against Gilbert Burns is definitely one of them. Wonderboy, he's kind of had an unfortunate situation. He's kind of been, kept out of title fights. Maybe the Woodley fights didn't impress too many people. I actually enjoyed the first one and didn't mind the second one, but I think that kind of left a stain that he's kind of hard to get over. Obviously, losing to Pettis like that in a fight he was winning, getting knocked out wasn't ideal. But that could, like, when you're spending so much time on the feet, that's going to happen sooner or later. And an unpredictable guy like Pettis, and I obviously think he beat Darren Till. I was surprised at that decision at the time. So, Wonderboy's had a bit of an unlucky run, and this is kind of his last chance maybe to get to the title shot and get that title. So, this is a huge fight for him. Obviously, he hasn't fought the level of competition that he had in previous years recently, but he hasn't looked like he's lost a step. He hasn't looked over the hill or anything like that. So, yeah, I think Gilbert Burns has been improving a lot fight to fight. He's a very good fighter. He's very well rounded now. But I think Wonderboy's style, and it's so hard to get in on Wonderboy to get a takedown. It's so hard to get inside near him to land punches without the risk of a big shot coming from him. So yeah, I'd be picking Wonderboy in this fight. But yeah, I think Gilbert Burns might kind of. He might look like a lot of a worse fighter than he is in this fight. Wonderboy has a habit of doing that to people, and I think he might do that here.
Yeah, it's we wonder why as well. It's an odd one because sometimes, you know, let's say Curtis Blades now, right? He's lost to Francis Ngannou twice, so it's going to be a little bit harder for him to get the title shot. And especially, like, let's say if someone has lost to the same guy twice for a title, it's almost about like a Joseph Benavidez versus Demetrius Johnson. Very hard to get back in, and that's what happened. Well, Wonderboy obviously drew one of those fights at Woodley, but now Woodley's gone. And the fact that he really hasn't even been placed in the title picture over the last while has been very odd, I think, to me. Now, this one, when you're fighting Gilbert Burns, if you beat Gilbert Burns, you have to be in that picture. You have to be in that talk. But it feels like they're trying to avoid that talk with him. And I'm not sure why. I think Dana White was like expecting him to be this like poster child, knockout artist. And then he had a couple of non-knockouts, let's say that. I didn't think they were the greatest fights in the world, but you liked them and stuff. They're not. Look, they weren't the worst fights in UFC history. There was
I wasn't like, I wasn't. They weren't like very like high or memorable fights that I put on a high on a list or anything. But battles, they were they were on an edge. I felt at any moment like and I think we saw when Woodley floored Wonderboy that the fight was on an edge, and maybe some people don't enjoy them, but I enjoyed them. Obviously, it wasn't a fantastic fight. I'm going to go back and watch. Yeah,
it's true, and like it feels like he's been trying to force himself back into it, and it's just not worked for him. But this fight, look, it's a very interesting fight for me. I think Gilbert Burns, he's a similar sort of build to Tyron Woodley. I think a more dangerous fighter even than Woodley. I think he hits very, very hard, on the ground. Absolutely just insane jiu-jitsu and everything like that. So if he can get the fight to the ground, Wonderboy has probably better jiu-jitsu than we know as well. I think he's his brother-in-law or something like that as a black belt, and he's been training a lot with him over the last while. And having Chris Weidman as well as his other brother-in-law is another black belt. And we talk about Wonderboy's wrestling over the last few years. Who's taking Wonderboy down? No one. So if Gilbert Burns is to do it,
you try and get him down.
Yeah, very, very rarely. Yeah, so I think Gilbert Burns, he's going to have to take lots of opportunities, but or take chances to get opportunities. I think that plays into the hands of Wonderboy though. Look, maybe he will knock him out, maybe he will land a shot. And you said Wonderboy hasn't lost a step. Not to go against myself, but I think he actually has a little bit. I don't think he's as fast as he once was, and I think it will open up for Burns. I think Burns will land a few shots, but I think Burns has showed as well that I don't think Burns is the best chin in the world. And I think if Wonderboy can land a few shots in him, I think he probably can knock him out. But it's an interesting fight. I think someone's getting knocked out in this fight. I really do. I'm not sure who. I'm a little bit biased towards Wonderboy, I think. But I don't know. I honestly don't. I'd find it very hard. I'd probably pick Wonderboy. We'd probably be doing the picks during the week here. But I think I'll pick Wonderboy to win the fight, but I could easily see Burns knocking him out as well. Look, a very, very fun fight. I'm looking forward to seeing it happening and to see what's going on. And that's basically all the MMA we have next week. I'm looking at Topology here, and the UFC 264 in 6 days time, and then we've Bellator 262 at 12 days time. So we'll obviously talk about that next week. But there's no big MMA. I know CFFC was on last night, but there's a big MMA card coming up next week, and then we'll be moving on from there. So I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait. So that's our UFC 264 breakdown. Graeme, we have to talk about it as well. We talked about it a lot last week. The whole Ian Garry Team KF situation, and about what would be said after it. So Team KF released a statement. I'll read out the statement here now if you'll bear with me for a few seconds. This quote from Team KF. This past week, Team KF has stayed silent out of respect for Cage Warriors promotion to minimise any disruption to the fantastic fights that they promote, and also not to interfere with the welterweight title bout on Fight Week. We now want to take the opportunity to set the record straight on the back of some statements and insinuations from the current welterweight champion and his manager. Team KF adheres to a set of ethics and values that are sacred above the needs of any one individual member. Some of the values that we openly promote are loyalty, honour and respect. Where an individual no longer abides by these values and expects special privileges in regards to their contribution to the club, and that individual will be informed that their position as a team member is untenable. No one individual is bigger than the overall welfare and safety of the team. With that in mind, Ian Garry was informed that he was no longer a member of the club after repeated warnings regarding his behaviour to other teammates and his coaches. that had become distinct since employment of a new manager in March. After this appointment, he became uncoachable. This was not a decision that was taken lightly, as considerable time and resources were dedicated to Ian's training at a cost to the club since he made his amateur debut a dozen fights ago, up until he attained his world title under the tutelage of his coaches with the support of his teammates. Team KF is drawing a line under the matter, and we return our focus to even more, making more champions and helping members achieve their fitness and martial arts goals. End of quote. So that's obviously that middle paragraph there, I suppose, where they said he became uncoachable, that he changed after he got his new manager, that he had repeated warnings for his behaviour towards teammates and coaches. That's very, very strong, and we talked about it last week, and we said, there's obviously been something that's happened there. We might never hear about it. Neither person might never say anything, like as usually happens here. Coaches and fighters have broken up in the past. But that's a very, very strong statement there to say, Ian Garry is uncoachable, and that, obviously his manager as well is Layla and Ali. If anyone watched my interview last week, I think everyone, and she actually messaged me and she apologized for coming into the interview and said, she just wanted to keep Ian kind of on an even keel during fight week, which, fair enough. I appreciate her coming on and saying that to me, so I thought I'd mention that as well, and she did it in private and everything, so, but I think it's good to mention that there. But so it's like his girlfriend / manager, and now Team KF came out and kind of didn't obviously mention her by name, but referred to her as the manager and stuff as well. Just all a bit weird. It's very, very obviously a very strong statement, and Ian Garry hasn't said much since. He kind of said, I'll leave my talking I'll do my talking in the cage, and he
did put out a statement, didn't he, about his team left him before the fight. Yeah.
He did, but he hasn't, he did that interview with Edith LaBelle, and it was a very good interview afterwards. I know we talked about that a little bit last week, and, he was like apologising to his family and stuff, and, it's just a very, very sad situation, to be honest. And, what did you think of the statement and the way they said he was like uncoachable, and, that he was warned. Let me just read it again because I don't want to get it wrong, but he had repeated warnings regarding his behaviour to other teammates and coaches. Like when someone says about behaviour towards other teammates, that makes you think like if something bad happened in sparring or something like that. And I don't know, I'm purely speculation here now, but that seems to be what they're saying. That's very strong, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the kind of early hopes of a lot of people when they heard about it was hopefully it can be worked out and, sorted out, and just some kind of like disagreement or misunderstanding. But it definitely seems like both sides of the thing are taking a kind of hard stance that this probably looks like for the foreseeable future anyway, it looks like this could be the end of I know obviously they've broken up, but these things happen in MMA and people disagree and they're back together sooner rather than later. But it looks like maybe Ian's going to need to start looking for a new team.
Yeah, it does look like that, because when he came out, and I obviously asked him about it and he wasn't saying anything, and then he said after my interview, which I've kind of felt a bit bad about doing it on fight week, but I asked a few people. And you have to ask those questions. If I went on and I didn't ask those questions and he walked out with no corner, what an idiot I would look like. I'm not doing my job in that situation, and I didn't want to do it, but I fucking had to. But anyway, that's not about me. But he came out and released that statement, and he said he basically said that his team kind of left him in the lurch on a few weeks out from fight week, which is a strong statement as well to say. But I don't think it's something that. I think you could get over that one. That's the sort of one you might be able to get past. But this statement that Team KF have left, I would agree with you that I don't think it's possible for them to get back together after that. It was very, very strong. Look, I don't know what the truth of it is. I'm sure the Team KF have their side of it. Ian Garry has his side of it, and the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. But there was definitely, things had changed, things had gone on. There was, obviously arguments, disagreements in camp, and they ended up breaking up. But I think, the big thing going forward, I see Team KF putting out like loads of pictures and stuff with their fighters, and hopefully it doesn't affect the team or any of the fighters, and hopefully it doesn't affect Ian Garry as well. But when I say hopefully, it is affecting Ian Garry. He's going to have to find a new team, a new place to train, a new way to train. Is he going to stay in Dublin, and keep training there? Is he going to go to the UK? Is he going to go to America or somewhere like that? And if he does stay in Dublin, like obviously there's Team Rhino or SPG, but Ian Garry and Dixie said.
But like, if you're going to believe, if you're going to take at face value what the team are saying, I don't think if you're not really following the rules or doing what you're told at Team Rhino or most gyms, they're not gonna be happy with you, and they're not gonna put up with it.
Yeah, but like you also have a fighter who's probably going to be fighting in the UFC, and like I like if I was a coach, I think, well, okay, especially like if you're John Kavanagh, you're fucking used to Conor McGregor, and like Ian Garry would be grand, he couldn't be much more hassle than the Conor McGregor. So like if I was John Kavanagh, I'd be sending him DMs. I'd be like, come on, Ian, let's go over here, and he'd have, like, in fairness, okay, the problem with that is, look, interviews I've done with him before, he said everyone in Bellator is shite and all this, and obviously we know basically everyone in the UFC, well, until Bellator started cutting fucking left, right and centre, but a lot of our SPG, everyone in SPG is in Bellator, and we know John Kavanagh's connections to the gym, he's called it straight Bellator gym before and things like that, so I think that would be tough, but look, if you're talking about from a sporting point of view, it'd probably be the best way he could go. He could be like in a camp with Conor McGregor, he could be training with Kiefer Crosby and Richard Kiley and Brian Moore and all those guys, and Will Flory and guys around his similar size, and fighting at a very good, like Peter Coelho, number one contender in the world now, probably at the lightweight division, who's fought at welterweight before. So there's, like, he did some very good training there. I don't know if that's possible. Team KF was kind of like an offshoot of SPG that kind of went completely against them, and are like, we saw what had gone on with John Kavanagh and Tom King and stuff like that, where ended up in kind of Conor McGregor saying, all right, kind of, you've made your point, stop talking about this in the end of it, and there was a lot of drama there. So I don't know if that's possible or not, but it's a big one now. Like, when's Ian Garry going to fight again? He was injured coming into the fight. How is he going to embed into a new team to prepare for his next fight? There's a lot of big questions there to ask, and it might be fine. Let's say if I don't know, Time or let me Wonderboy. Let's say a Wonderboy, like, I know he's father training, but let's say he's a normal trainer and they fell out. Well, if he had to go and train somewhere else for his next fight, he mightn't be too bad. He's at the very, very top of the game. He's been there for years. Ian Garry's still a guy learning. He's still a guy coming up. He's a very, very good fighter. Don't get me wrong. I think he'll be a very good UFC fighter. But he's still a guy learning. Still a guy on the ups. 7 fights in? He needs a team. He needs a coach. And
he needs not to rush into this next fight.
Yeah.
He needs to sort a lot of things out first, and then you don't want to rush into something and take unnecessary risks with your career. Just it doesn't have to be a long time out, but you need to get some things in order before you start signing for another fight, I think. Yeah,
you really, really do. And like in that thing as well, they talk about his manager and they talk about different things. I just hope he's not getting taken advantage of anywhere either, and that's a big thing with sports people. Now, maybe we haven't seen so much of it in MMA, but like when we've seen people getting taken advantage of by managers and hangers on and different things like that. Now, I don't know if that's the case with Ian Garry. Maybe I was going to say he's the only one who could answer that. He probably even can't. It'll probably be 5 years down the road when you're looking back at it, you can answer it. But like, I hope that's not the case. And Conor McGregor had a few fucking hangers on, like you hanging around him there. So maybe you could get some advice off of him for how to deal with that. But yeah, it's look, it's a very serious and sad situation. I think Graeme Bylan put out a thing the other day saying that it's a pity he's never seen such kind of a close coach and fighter relationship over the years, and for it to kind of break up this way is very unfortunate. But two very obviously very passionate people and a very passionate team. It was things like this are maybe not bound to happen, but like when there is a serious clash and there is two different views of it, it's a breakup like this is very, very unfortunate and sad. But however, what can we do about it? Right, Graeme, anything else? Have we anything else to talk about? That it? We finished? Have we all of MMA covered? Yeah, are you muted there, or are you just gone? Have you just left? I think Graeme's gone. Anyway, all right, I'll end it from there. Graeme has just died in the middle of the SevereMMA podcast. podcast. But we were over anyway, so no bother. Right, everybody, thanks very much for listening. I appreciate it. If you want to sign up for our Patreon, do that now. Patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. My internet is, I hope my internet's not gone, actually. It's not, because I clicked up in there. But my internet's been terrible over the last few days. But we have some big interviews coming up. I have 2 of them already lined up. One coming out. Here's a bit of a hint for you. One coming out at 6 p.m. GMT on Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern time Monday to start off our Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier preview. Another big one coming Tuesday, and I will have more that I've yet to organise throughout the week as well. So big coverage coming from SevereMMA. Patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. Now is the time to sign up. I'm telling you, now is the time to sign up. Do that. Let us know what you think. Patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time. Good luck. If you would like to support the podcast and get some